Welcome to our National Conversation, a podcast in which we discuss politics from all angles. We are completely nonpartisan, and all views, respectfully stated, are welcome here. Our podcast is unique in that it is hosted and run by students who are focused on finding solutions to the biggest problems facing America.
Welcome to the ONC podcast, ONC standing for Our National Conversation. Today is November 1st, 2024. We're roughly 4 days away from the election, and given that fact, it might be 1 or 2 days by the time this is published, I'd imagine you can guess what we're going to be talking about today. I do have a guest with me, and we're going to be discussing some things related to the election, but really quickly, just to preface this discussion, if you are looking for a PhD level analysis of the policy issues in the debate, you're looking for the most recent trends in the polling, this is probably not the podcast for you. You're going to want to go somewhere else. I myself, as the host here, my name's Sam Taylor. I'm just an undergraduate student, and frankly, I don't know jack all. What we are going to be doing instead is having various conversations, debates, etc., to try to understand the political perspectives, the demographic experiences, and so forth as they relate to current events. So this will happen from the Republican perspective, Democrats, progressives, conservatives, people of all different viewpoints, walks of life, etc. And hopefully, in having these conversations, we'll contribute a little bit to the fight against toxic polarization, political misunderstandings, etc., and just really try to understand what's going on, where can we find common ground, and also where can't we, and just trying to map out that terrain. So, as I said, today we're going to be focusing mainly on the election. Now, I'm joined today by Connor Chung, who also works with me at our National Conversation. I just, by the way, am the Chief Operating Officer, and Connor, you are the Director of Policy Content. Could you briefly introduce yourself, explain what it is you do?
Hey everyone, my name's Connor. I'm the Director of Policy Content and Strategy here at our National Conversation, where I oversee the Policy Content Department, and we produce a variety of civic education materials to help reduce effective polarization, everything from opinion pieces and original policy proposals and such. So that's a little rundown of what we do here at the department.
Awesome. Now, Connor, every week, or most every week, you ask some of your writers, interns, volunteers, mainly students who are devoting their time to ONC, to write some pieces reacting to current events. We try to keep these short, succinct, a little snappy, and the most recent question was, what is the most important issue for the administration, whatever it is, to tackle from a Gen Z perspective once the election is over? Now, obviously, that's a very big question, and we can't answer that in its entirety, but maybe you can give us a little insight into what you're seeing from your writers. What are they suggesting, as primarily Gen Z authors, is the most important issue? What concerns them the most?
Well, we seem to really have a wide breadth of opinion here. Our writers, they're all university students for the most part, so they're on the younger side. This is the next generation of the American political landscape. And generally, what I'm seeing is, I'd say the top three issues are probably abortion, environmental issues, so climate change seems to be a big one, and I think number three has got to be the cost of living crisis, especially in relation to the price of homes right now. We all know that purchasing a home and owning land that's always been a staple of the American dream, and I think as a lot of these university students are graduating and trying to find work and trying to settle into that American dream, that they're really finding it very difficult or just out of reach altogether. So I think those are the three biggest issues that I'm seeing from our writers right now.
So sort of a combination of these, social issues that you generally associate with our really polarized or divided landscape, and then just basic economic ones. In your own experience, just as you're talking with your friends and so forth, because Connor, I believe you're kind of at the cusp of Gen Z there. Like you're at the very tail end of being a millennial, so maybe you're associated with some of these groups. What are you seeing just in your everyday life as you talk to people about this? Is that aligning with these three issues that you've mentioned the writers are concerned with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have friends both on the millennial side of the aisle as well as the Gen Z side. So I'm getting to see both perspectives here. And I think Gen Z is definitely feeling the brunt of the difficulties right now. Older millennials who are in their mid to late 30s, who are entering the job market, 10 or 15 years ago, aren't quite experiencing the same difficulties that we here in Gen Z are. So what I'm seeing really from people as I'm out and about is, I think cost of living inflation is probably the biggest thing that that you get a bipartisan overlap on, and not only a bipartisan overlap, but it seems that both the sexes are in agreement on this too, because I think most people are aware or can observe this in public. Regrettably, there is a really big divide between the sexes in Gen Z right now. It's unprecedented, unlike any other divide that you've seen in previous generations. And so what you get is you get a bipartisan split like you normally do, but you're also getting a split between the sexes on certain issues. So I think men and women, whether you're conservative or liberal, are both in agreement that, probably the most threatening issue right now is rampant inflation, and the fact that, a basket of groceries is 50% more expensive than it was 3 or 4 years ago. But you also get issues like, climate change and abortion, which are definitely important issues, no doubt, but I think skew more towards young liberal women. And so you also have that split. But that's kind of what I'm seeing, just the prevalence of those three issues.
Got it. And you're seeing this, in your own interactions and so forth. I mean, have you done any further, I just out of curiosity, any further looks into, like, I don't know, what Pew Research has published on this, or, things to that effect?
I'm not sure. Are you referencing the like the most prominent issues among young people, or?
Yeah, well, you've brought up quite a few different things there, so I think it would probably be best to kind of take these one at a time. I think the first thing that you seem to be returning to, and seems to be the strongest alignment between what you're seeing in your personal life and what you're seeing among your writers, is a focus on these economic issues, inflation, and so forth. So let's start there. Now, obviously, standard of living, basic economic security, etc. I mean, these are pretty universal issues. So, I mean, have you noticed, and are there things that you can point to illustrate that, there's something more unprecedented, or at least relatively unique, going on here in terms of the focus we're placing on these issues, the concern that Gen Z in particular has for them? Because, I mean, these seem to be pretty universal issues.
Right, yeah. I think when you're talking about something like inflation, I mean, it's definitely not unprecedented in a novel sense. I mean, America's seen inflation before. The 1970s, under the Carter administration is a good example of that. My mom's boyfriend, he's a fantastic, very nice older gentleman. And, he was telling me the other day, this isn't, it's not exactly a new thing. The context might be different, but, people were waiting in lines at the gas station for sometimes, an hour or more just to hopefully get a couple cans of gas to maybe fill half of their tank. So I think while it might be, the worst economic, the worst economic conditions in living memory for Gen Z, it might not be, exactly unprecedented. My fear is that, there's potential for things to get worse here. I don't see a scenario where the economy recovers or the price of housing becomes just somehow affordable overnight. I only see these issues, the potential for them to exacerbate, especially considering, the amount of debt that this country is in, which is a massive problem.
So do you feel, then, just first of all, because I do have some further questions on these economic issues and how they relate to the election. But first of all, would you agree with what you're seeing from your writers and your circle? Like, for you, are these the major issues that, like, are the most significant for this next administration?
Yeah, I think so overall. I mean, for me, number one by a country mile is definitely the standard of living. You know, that's the bedrock of everything. If you can't put groceries on the table, or if you're having trouble making your rent because rent prices are just out of control, or frankly, you know, just wages just aren't keeping up with the cost of living in general, and that's just outstripping wage growth. You know, that's a massive, massive problem. You know, to me, issues like, there are certain issues that I consider to be, you know, luxury issues, like particularly like social issues. You know, these are important things too, but I mean, first and foremost, we have to stabilize the republic. We have to stabilize the standard of living so that people can just live, period. Because when you're surviving, it's hard to have conversations about, you know, seemingly, in my opinion, seemingly trivial things like identity politics.
Okay. So let's dig into that distinction a little bit more that you've raised between these social issues and these you know, basic standard of living, economic issues, and so forth. Because I'd imagine there are a fair number of people who might take issue with drawing that distinction. Obviously, you know, one could retort that a lot of these social issues, ranging from abortion and other aspects of healthcare access to, you know, issues of discrimination, etc., whether racial, you know, based on sexual orientation, gender identity, etc., can have really tangible economic effects, can create vast disparities in socioeconomic status, etc. So, in light of those potential retorts, try to help me understand where you're coming from in drawing this distinction. Yeah, I'll just turn that to you. Okay, sorry about that. We just had some slight internet issues. We're back, so you might have seen the screen jump a little bit there. So Connor, just to reiterate, you've drawn a distinction between these social issues that you've classified as kind of luxury issues, and then economic issues, which you feel and are seeing, at least from some of your writers, are more important, more fundamental, etc. One could retort that that distinction can't really be made very cleanly. That a lot of these social issues, ranging from discrimination to, you know, abortion and healthcare access, etc., also things like climate change, can have really tangible economic effects on the standard of living, on disparities in that standard, etc. So explain to me a little bit, help me to understand where you're coming from in drawing this distinction, and what you might say to someone who would offer that retort to you.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. By luxury issues, social issues, I'm not referring to like climate change or abortion. You know, people might have different opinions on those, depending on whether you're, you know, conservative or liberal or maybe somewhere in between. But I guess what I'm referring to broadly is just identity politics, things like, I don't know, LGBTQ curriculum and, you know, public school libraries and that sort of thing, or the right for, I think a big one now is the right for minors to be able to undergo like gender transitional surgeries without parental consent and so forth. So just like issues like that, where it's like, okay, we can debate those things, but I don't, maybe at a future date when the republic is more stable, when our country is more stable, when people can put food on the table again, because, you know, the middle class is really, really struggling. You know, I live in I grew up in a very middle class area of San Diego here, and it really makes me sad. You know, I feel like I'm old enough now to be able to look back, let's say, you know, 15 or 16 years ago, and look at the area that I live in my little city here, and say, wow, you know, this is a place that was really thriving, that you could tell that the middle class was doing well. And nowadays, it's really like it's hollowed out. It's really sad. Just you could see physically in the infrastructure that the money it's not flowing in to middle class America anymore. And you see it when you go to the downtown and the downtown core, where all the wealthy bureaucrats are. They channel all the money into there, but it's not flowing into middle class America anymore. And it's not. I don't think it's just where I live. I've heard time and time again from a lot of different people. It just seems to be a recurring theme on podcasts and such that the middle class is being hollowed out. So, if we can talk about these other sorts of issues, but preferably at a future time, I think we're all being gypped right now, and this is something, whether you're conservative or liberal, I think we can all agree on, is that, if the middle class is undermined and destroyed, then we can't have a democracy. A healthy and robust middle class is, for me, is the most important issue in this country, whether you're liberal or conservative. And if you don't have that, then it's very easy to slide into autocracy, because when people are busy just trying to survive and put food on the table, it's hard to engage in meaningful, productive political discussions. It's much harder to become educated, and therefore you're more prone to coercion by the state. So that's my main concern here, is just stabilizing our country and returning the middle class to prosperity.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing that perspective, Connor. And I'd imagine there's plenty more research that can be done into all of the economics of this, validating or invalidating what you're saying based on the evidence. But at the very least, you're talking about a very real perception that I think is very evident, that may very well be reflected in the actual facts on income, on our economic trajectory, on inflation, etc. I mean, certainly in inflation. But my question is, one of the biggest, I guess one of the biggest reasons that I said this perception seems very evident is because it seems to align a lot with sort of Trump's campaign rhetoric and so forth. The term populism has been thrown around a lot in kind of arguing against this establishment or elite or whatever else that seems to be hoarding a great deal of either money, resources, or political power. In some ways, it's actually kind of similar to the arguments Bernie Sanders would make on the left, which is interesting, that sort of populist convergence on those different sides of the aisle. But I'm curious about what your reaction is to that general approach from the Trump campaign. Whether you think that that's something unique for Trump, whether that's something you're seeing that seems to speak to you, whether you're seeing this sort of rhetoric in both sides of the aisle, and just what your thoughts are on how this issue you're describing relates to the campaign.
Yeah, I think that's it's an important point that you make, Sam, that this is something you see on the left as well. Bernie Sanders, when living standards drop and people are starting to get a sense that the American dream is either out of reach for a variety of reasons, or is being deliberately kind of taken away from them to the benefit of an upper class, or let's say a new aristocracy, right, where wealth flows upwards. And I personally, I'm a conservative, but I can recognize that there has to be some sort of regulation on capitalism, because if you don't, then it just cannibalizes itself within a few generations, and you get it's just the natural inclination for companies to want to go ahead and buy out the competition and consolidate power and therefore consolidate wealth. So a free and fair market is important. I'm a market economy guy. I don't like socialist or economics, but there has to be some sort of regulation. Otherwise, you get this catastrophe that we're in. And Bernie Sanders also recognizes that, not just Donald Trump. So I think both of these people are just really playing to the natural sensibilities, the natural I guess for lack of a better word, vibe among the American middle class, the people of this country, who are starting to sense that something is shifting, something's wrong, wealth is flowing out of the middle class and into the upper classes, and they don't like that. So I think both sides are really playing to this, and I think the concerns of the working class and the middle class are completely founded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have two questions to follow up on that. The first would be, obviously, Bernie Sanders is not in the current presidential race. Do you see the same sort of issue talked about reflected in the Harris campaign, or do you just not know? Have you not been really focused on that rhetoric?
No, I don't think that this issue is reflected in the Harris campaign. Don't get me wrong, there are historical figures from the left that I have a certain respect and admiration for in the Western world over history, but unfortunately, Kamala Harris just isn't one of them for me. I just don't think she has the wherewithal or the bandwidth, and furthermore, I might be inclined to have some sort of sympathy or respect for her if she really represented the concerns of the middle class in this country. I think she really is essentially an establishment candidate, and the way I view the world, I look at it and I think that look, it's been 79, almost 80 years since the end of the Second World War, and that whole framework, we live within a globalist framework now. It's how the world works, and power dynamics and alliance structures and economic structures, global economic structures, they're rapidly deteriorating, and I think I foresee great change in the world very soon, and I think that the Kamala Harris campaign, the fact that she was just kind of thrust onto the people, onto the Democratic ticket. The way it happened was a little weird, and I know people have some questions or concerns about that. Whether you do or not, I think this kind of like haphazard approach by the Democratic Party really just represents the chaos of just like the last throes or the last breath of this, the last vestiges of this like terminally ill global order. I think that they're out of ideas, and they're just kind of rolling with the status quo and of the last 6, 7, or 8 decades, and hoping that it's going to suffice. And I don't think it does for a lot of people.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing that view. I am going to push a little bit back on something, or at least offer some complexity here that I want to determine kind of your reaction to here. Because it seems like you've identified that, in your view, kind of the sense you're getting is that these economic issues related to the middle class and so forth, we might construe these as populist issues, are really big for Gen Z. And in your view, based on kind of what you're getting from the campaign rhetoric, etc., Harris isn't really reflecting that. On the other hand, we do seem to have, at least according to, I'm looking right now at a source from the Harvard Youth Poll published by the Harvard Kennedy School Institute of Politics here. And just right off the bat, I'm seeing that young people in general seem to strongly favor Harris. Now, there may be a very prominent contingent of young people, especially young men, who would lean towards Donald Trump. But I'm just curious as to kind of what your reaction is here. If Harris isn't representing these populist viewpoints, and yet they're really big for Gen Z, why are we getting this general move of young people towards Harris? Now, obviously, you're not going to have an expert answer to that, but is there anything in your experience, what you're seeing in your writers, your friends, or your views that might help to explain what's going on here?
Yeah, I think you're actually right. I think a lot of young people, I think most young people do shift towards the left. And I think it's actually it's closer than people might think. I'm still of the opinion, just from what I'm seeing in public among Gen Z when I go out and I observe people, is that there's a pretty stark split between the sexes. I think young men, I think a lot of young men, not all of them, but I think the majority of young men are conservative, but they choose to keep their mouth closed just for fear of it's like a lot of young men are walking on eggshells these days because they feel that people can be offended quite easily, and especially if they voice the fact that they're conservative. That's not, unfortunately, that's erroneously and regrettably associated with fascism. And nobody wants to be called a Nazi, right? That'll ruin your career. So I get why a lot of young men are kind of silent on this, or they might kind of just say, oh well, I'm for whatever, whoever allows people to just be who they want to be. And meanwhile, I think young women are a lot more inclined, because they do skew more to the left for sure. I think they feel a lot more inclined to voice their opinions on politics, because of the fact that the left is the status quo now. So if you echo those things, then that's great. You're on board with progress, and you're proclaiming these things boldly. But if you're conservative, then it's you really got to be careful with what you say and frame it in a certain way. And so I think a lot of young men kind of choose to remain apolitical, or just flat out, maybe tell white lies here and there about what they really stand for, because they don't want to ruin their friendships or chance at love with the opposite sex, and so forth. So I think that's kind of, to one degree or another, I think there's some sort of element of that going on as well.
Yeah. Now, Connor, I certainly don't want to pry too much. I'm just curious as to where a lot of these senses of demographic differences and so forth are coming from for you. Are you getting this from a lot of stories that you read? Are you getting this from personal experiences you have? What's sort of the information, the information trajectory look like for you? I'm just trying to understand kind of where this perception is coming from. Because it seems to align with a lot of what I'm seeing as well, but I kind of want to corroborate that.
Yeah, sure. I think it comes from a variety of different places. A lot of it comes from just my personal physical experiences when I'm out in the world. I'm a social person. I'm an extrovert. I like to meet people. I love chatting with people, whether you're liberal or conservative. I just enjoy people, period. So I do get out a lot, and I meet all sorts of different people, young people, from both sides of the aisle, men and women, you name it. And yeah, I think I've just been kind of curating these experiences, over the last, 3, 4, 5 years. Especially, I've been taking close note in the last, especially in the last year or so, because things are so touchy now, obviously. But yeah, I'd say it's a combination of personal experience as well as just stuff that you see online too, right? Because people say, well, that's online, that's almost like a fantasy. It's not a real representation of the real world. And I'd argue against that and say, actually, I think it's more so a representation of how people actually feel, because I think nowadays people are more inclined to say what they want on the internet, because there's a certain level of anonymity that comes with that, and therefore people can voice how they can really show their true colors, for better or for worse. Meanwhile, in public, people have to kind of curate themselves a little bit. So the stuff I see online is, and you got to remember that there's also the potential for, the echo chamber effect, or just getting trapped by algorithms that show you more of what you want to see, and that's something that I'm aware of, even though I take partisan stances on a lot of stuff. But I'm also seeing, what I try to go to other platforms where it might be more left-leaning and see. just like to read and see how these people are conversing amongst themselves and how they actually feel. And it really just seems like I don't know, for better or for worse, it's people are grouping up in different areas on the internet, saying things, and in combination with that, it's like I said, I think it's a lot of my personal experience from just bar side chats or chats at a dinner with friends of a friend and such.
And I don't want to put you on the spot here, because I know when like there's all these experiments and videos and so forth. Like you ask someone something really simple, like name a woman, and then they can't. Like they're I don't have an instance here. So I'm just curious, do you have particular experiences that you wanted to share of kind of like what this sort of looks like, as far as getting this information on these demographic differences, etc., or you don't have anything off the top of your head that you're willing to share? Perfectly
No,
fine either way, and we can cut this out. But
no, not at all. You know what? I try not to talk about politics when I'm out, just because I don't know. I don't think a lot of people appreciate it, but just because things are so touchy these days, and it's just politics is a sore subject in and of itself. But sometimes I find clever ways of cracking a joke about things. Maybe not at the expense of the left or the right, trying to score partisan points, but just kind of hinting at how broken our system is as a whole right now. And sometimes that'll open people up, and then I'll talk to people, and it seems like people are willing to open up a little bit about I'll say, hey, well, it's kind of crazy, huh? You told me you went to the grocery store this morning. They're like, yeah, it's well, I just paid whatever $1 million for a gallon of milk and a dozen eggs, and I'm like, wow, isn't that crazy? Like, and then we get on a little thing about inflation and the cost of living, and I'm like, that's something, huh? That our parents, the baby boomers, were at our age. Think about it. They had a house by this time. They had a couple kids by this time, and a lot more than we did. So I was like, here we are, in our mid-20s, or sometimes older than that, in our 30s, and we're still struggling to make good on the American dream and really grasp this here. So I think that resonates a lot with people. I do talk a lot about that sort of stuff because I think it's a bipartisan issue, and I think people are a lot more willing to kind of chat about that a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, Connor, we could talk about this for a very long time. We could delve into all of these subjects. I had more questions that I wanted to ask you, like how does this relate to what presidents can actually do in terms of the economy? How much power do they have to actually address some of these issues, etc.? But unfortunately, we're running out of time here, so we'll have to save that for a future discussion. Though certainly I'd encourage anyone listening to look into that if they have the time. But thank you again, Connor, for sharing your perspective, kind of informing me where you're coming from, where you're getting these ideas, how you're reacting to other people who might object to the way you're framing things, etc. So yeah, I just want to thank you again, and hopefully the audience can get something out of this.
Thank you for hosting, Sam. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, have a great day.
You as well.
This podcast was brought to you by Our National Conversation, a place where students generate policy solutions to the biggest problems facing America. Join us in freeing political dialogue from hyperpartisanship. To learn more about what you heard today, check us out at ournationalconversation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Our National Conversation to show your support and keep up with our latest efforts.